This is your host Swapnil Bhartiya and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. And today we have with us Ernest Lefner, Chief Product Officer at Gluware. Ernest, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I really look forward to it.
Yeah, and there is so much to talk about today. We are going to, of course, talk about NetOps, but more importantly, we are going to talk about you because you kind of moved out of financial sector, as you're also saying. You're out of corporate world and now you're in the startup world. So I want to understand that part of journey also. It's hard for me to find a point where I want to start, but to be honest with you, let's start with some of the basic, which is like if I ask you, because you joined the company in December, what is Gluware?
Well, Gluware is a network automation and orchestration company focused on, intelligent network automation. It's really been around for quite some time. In their previous, incarnation, they really focused on SD-WAN and automating SD-WAN ACI. But they've really grown and matured into a fully blossomed automation and orchestration firm.
Perfect. And since you just joined the company, so you do have, very refreshed version of the company. We cover Gluware all the time. So I just wanted to hear your perspective now. I will talk about you a bit.
Sure.
Tell us, that what you have been doing in the financial sector and why you decided to, not only just change roles, but change the whole industry. Why?
That's a great one. So, I've got 25 plus years in financial services, across a variety of different companies. And, I'm most well known for like working at Bank of America, for example, and doing the insourcing of the HP network. It was almost an $800 million insourcing of the network back. And I built the engineering architecture teams for network security and voice services. And also I started an organization called ONUG. I don't know if you're familiar with it, the Open Networking User Group, which is really all about sharing experiences and shortcutting the adoption of technology through those shared experiences, whether it's software-defined networking or cloud or governance and analytics. We're really trying to help move the industry forward. And coming to Gluware was it was a little bit different, right? For being the network executive that's tried to have to solve these problems on the ground for 25 years, you're either someone looking at it new, you're either someone who's, doing some scripting, doing it yourself, or you're someone that's using a tool. I've done all of those and I really struggled. And what it came down to was there needs to be a platform of capable automation there to start you day one. And that's really what Gluware is about, and that's what drove me to be a part of that.
Right. And once again, there are so many keywords that you not necessarily keywords, but jargons and a lot of things that I want to go in detail. We don't have that much time. But so let's start with some basic or major ones. Let's just pick, let's say, NetOps. You have seen the industry for so long, and you also touched upon, the owner group and all those things. We, of course, covered it and talked about that. Things are changing now. We live in a cloud-centric world. People may not realize, but networking is more or less like highways to big cities. Without highways, cities will die off, right? So if I ask you, what is the role that NetOps is playing in the modern, cloud native or cloud-driven, whatever term you want to prefer, is playing there?
That's a great question. I'll probably answer it in a few different ways. The first is that, the journey to cloud is different. And what we've seen over the last few years is there was this initial rush to cloud. And then people came back and said, well, maybe I put too much out there. What's the right thing to put out in the cloud? And so they've kind of come back. You've seen a little bit of a withdrawal there. And what you're finding is that, the network and the network delivery is expanding at an exponential rate. People are like, well, I'm going to the cloud. That means less network. Well, it actually means more network, right? More provisioning, more routers, more switches. And the complexity of that environment is going up significantly. So you're seeing a much larger burden on the NetOps teams. You've got the raising the bar from a security perspective that's impacting NetOps teams, and the provisioning of those services are getting much more complicated. So you're finding a day in the life of a NetOps person becoming much more difficult than it was even just a few years ago.
When we talk about cloud native or cloud era, the whole DevOps movement, we kind of looked at, breaking down old silos.
Right.
We also think of, unicorn developers, who can do everything. That was the whole idea, right? But the fact is, that's not the reality. We have, dev security teams, people. And it has nothing to do with the role. It's about some folks, they have interest and expertise in this particular area. And you do want expertise in certain area. And that I feel is kind of creating, you can call it federated or, kind of soft silos are still there. So, but when we talk about cloud, one more thing happening in the cloud native is that almost every company has to have a cloud or software strategy, which means that not everybody is Google, not everybody can have Google like infrastructure. So there are a lot of companies, they have nothing to do with that, which also means that we have to simplify things for you. So how is Gluware making it easier for such folks so they can leverage all of those things without being an expert in all those areas? Because it can get very complicated very quickly.
You're absolutely right. I think I read an article that said in the next few years, AWS is going to be hiring 50,000 cloud engineers. If they really are hiring 50,000 cloud engineers, then we have really no hope of making all of our network engineers become coders, right? Because that shift of expertise isn't going to happen. So we've got to figure out how to marry those problems together. How do we start bringing to bear, the unicorn you find of someone who can do it all, right? Give them the freedom and the capability to build for the custom that the business needs, but yet still leverage that great experience of your network engineer and allow them to automate as well. And sort of the greatness of Gluware is they can meet you anywhere in that journey you want to be. And we have, there's some new stuff coming out like RPA, low code, no code, right? You can get into Gluware without having to be an expert, understanding what your expertise, which is being a good engineer, and you're able to link all the different things that you want to do together, whether it's config, OSM, right? Whether it's audit and compliance, and you're able to execute that automation through the tool without having to be an expert. And that low code, no code approach, whether it's building a robotic process automation or whether it's just doing an inventory and an audit, that stuff comes standard out of the box, which is impressive, right? Because you don't have to be an Ansible expert. You don't have to be a Python expert to get the benefit.
Can you also talk about the role that automation is playing in further simplifying things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned just a minute ago, the number of routers and switches in the world is getting bigger exponentially as the cloud expands. So the number of devices that have to be automated isn't getting smaller, it's getting bigger. And so when you look for an automation platform, you don't want to be stuck figuring out, what's my inventory? How many Cisco switches do I have, right? That's the stuff that you need out of the box, right? You need that in the win column day one. And then the simplification is, how do you group those together? How do you build the higher level business services, link them to the automation components that are below? And that allows you to do the things that you need to do to manage the network easy in a very quick and easy way, that CI/CD pipeline encapsulated. So our operators on the ground are saying, I just got a NIST alert that came in through Glue. I need to do an inventory to determine how many devices are affected. I need to script a workaround and roll that out, or potentially roll out an automated OS upgrade. And the goal really is to take those hard tasks that we're struggling with, that really are the risk in the environment, and simplify those out. And the great part about that is your unicorns and your engineers then get to focus on how the applications are consuming the network instead of just trying to make the network work.
I want to just look at it from a different perspective. We have been talking about what role is NetOps and networking play. Now let's just talk about if you look at these high-level IT trends, although of course cloud adoption is happening, there are still a lot of companies, they still have, you can call it traditional or legacy setup, and they are kind of modernizing themselves. How is that changing the operation of networks? What is the impact network is facing because of these changes?
No, it's interesting. There are a couple big trends, right? COVID's one of them, right? We've got another big trend around zero trust coming down the pipeline, where now the security model's changing. And I think the landscape, that line is being blurred between NetOps and security personnel. And you're finding that instead of being in that silo, like you mentioned before, you're finding that there's a joint effort that's got to happen. And this is where Net DevOps is really starting to take hold, is that concept of how do we break that silo down? How do we bring people together and leverage all of those DevOps best practices and principles and bring them to bear for the network? In order to manage security at scale, in order to manage network at scale in the growing node environment, you've got to look for those efficiencies. And as you see the NetOps, folks working very, very close with security, you're seeing those natural synergies start to come to fruition.
Once again, as I was saying earlier, there are so many topics that popped up from your answer that I want to go through all of those, but we don't have time, and I would love to have sessions with you again in future as well. But let's just once again pick some ones, like let's talk about intent-based networking. I want you to demystify what do these terms mean and why should folks care about them?
That's a great question. And I think it's an underserved question quite a bit. Everybody claims to be intent-based, right? And what people mean when they say intent initially is that I've got a config set, a golden config, a template, and I can roll that template out for you at a push of a button. But it's not really intent, right? Intent is things like, hey, I'd like to roll 10% QoS out to my network, but I've got Juniper switches and Arista switches and Cisco switches. And what like Gluware does is it interprets that intent for you. It says, oh, you want 10% to go out to these devices? It builds the config for you. It figures out how that configuration should be, what those commands are, and it rolls them all out for you. And that's where you start getting into that intelligent network, right? With that eye towards self-operating, because now you've got that closed loop. You've got that closed loop development model that you're going to be able to follow and build and run your network by. So it's really exciting. And I appreciate you asking that question.
We are in the, I don't know, it's hard to say, beginning of 2022 or what is, as I said, it's been a long year, last 2 years. But we are at the beginning of this year and we can start talking about how things will look like. So if I ask you, based on the trends that you talked about in the beginning, and also the needs that are changing, how do you see network operations, how they will evolve in the coming years? We cannot talk about, 5 years from now, that's what COVID taught us. Don't talk too much in future.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. NetOps is going to grow, and NetDevOps is really what you're going to see emerge as security and network get closer together, as the complexities of managing environments, workloads, both in the cloud environment as well as in on-prem data centers come to, as they start to grow, the complexities aren't going to get smaller. So you're going to see the synergies through NetDevOps come together, and you're really going to see automation come to the forefront. I think you've really seen like a permission, like the NetDevOps community is starting to come together. The automation community, you're really starting to see network automation be something that's real, right, for a change versus something that was talked about over the last 10 to 15 years. And you're going to see that proliferation of automation to help drive that next generation of network operators. So I expect big things to happen in the merging of security and NetOps, and I expect automation to become a big topic for the next few years.
What kind of challenges do you see this adoption will create? Because there's always an opportunity and creation challenges.
Coming from the user side, the big challenge is going to be adoption. Right, you've got a lot of people that are working in NetOps for a long time who said, "Hey, I didn't need to learn how to code." It turns out they were right; they didn't. Right? They said, "I don't need automation to get the things done that I need to get done." And I think the big challenge is going to be, how do you normalize that automation inside of the processes they use today, and then connect that to the higher level business processes that all of the companies use to operate IT? Because it really comes down to understanding what you're trying to do from a business perspective and tying that back down through the layers of IT. And that's going to be a big focus. That's a big challenge.
Now, we of course talked about these challenges before that. We talked about the opportunity that are there. What does this mean for Gluware? So if I ask just hold a crystal ball in your hand and tell me how is this year going to look like for Gluware? What things do you have in pipeline or in the roadmap?
That's a great question. I've been there about 60 days now, and I can tell you that the roadmap is pretty sexy, right? In the early 2022, you're going to see RPA hit. It's robotic process automation. That's really going to be the bow that ties the products together inside the platform. We've got NIST integration now. We're taking CVEs directly in, and we're able to action those as a part of the platform. We've got topology coming later on this year, which is going to be about helping to visualize the network, really pointed towards making operating it a little bit easier. And then, listen, we just got the funding from Bain, $43 million. If you take a look at some of the press releases, we hired a head of VP of security. We got a VP of AI and automation, or AI ops. And that's really starting to paint a picture of where we're going to be heading. I think you can expect us to expand horizontally into new platforms and new capabilities and really start pushing the boundary of what self-automation starts to look like. I'm very excited about the future of Gluware.
I'm excited too, because I get to cover all those, progress that you folks are making. Ernest, thank you so much for taking time out today, and of course, talk about your own journey. And more importantly, we talked about the whole evolution of NetOps. I love that conversation. I would love to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd be happy to come back anytime.